We are in chapter 19, lesson 22. Solomon says this: better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than he who is perverse in speech and is a fool. Listen, integrity supersedes all other human characteristics because it involves honesty and it involves a strong moral principle or principles in a person's life. Principles that normally we call a person as a person of integrity when they hold to the principles of God's Word. Now, one thing that is important in integrity is that you hold to the principles of godly, righteous principles instead of holding to the principles of the customs and the norms of the day. I am saying that very often lately because our world, our United States, is upside down. What God's Word says is an abomination is now the custom and rule of the world. Think about this. I've said this many times. What 30 years ago was an abomination and a travesty would never be spoken on TV, would never be brought up in a public conversation, would never even be spoken of at home. 20 years ago became kind of acceptable, and now it's the norm. That's how things go. You cannot drive up and down our highways, our Highway 3 or 45, without seeing billboards of things that are totally ungodly and offensive, and 30 years ago would not have been put in print, and yet they are there. It is better to be a poor man who walks in his integrity than to be a rich man or someone else who all that's coming out of their mouth is perverse language. Verse 2. Also, it is not good for a person to be without knowledge, and he who makes haste with his feet errs. The actual original translation does not use the word person, it uses the word soul. Now, I need you to understand, when we think of a person, we think of a body, soul, and spirit. With this flesh, we think of who we are. But the reality is the person that's inside of us that is what will go to heaven and what must be saved or what will continue to be lost is the soul. So Solomon is saying here, it is not good for a soul to be without knowledge. Knowledge. It's not good for you to make decisions quickly. It's not good for you to go to someone and say, well, you're from 50 miles away and you've got a briefcase, so you must be an expert. And for us to believe people that we've never met before and take their opinion and let them sell us their product. Listen, folks, if anybody is ever coming to you to try to get you to do something where they are earning a living from it, you need to understand they are not selling that product that they are pushing on you because they're just good people. They're selling it because they're trying to make a living to pay their house notes. And the problem with that is not all people have integrity in doing that, and not all people will do something that is good for you. Many of them just want to make the sale, just want to make the contract, just get the contract sold, get your credit card number on the contract so you are stuck. And if you back out and you don't back out in the state of Texas within 3 days, you have just lost your money and you're pretty well upside down because most contracts today are written so airtight that you can't get out of them. You have lost your money. Whether you take care of one thing, you have 1 day or you have 500 days, if you only do 1 day and say, I need out of this, if you're past 72 hours, you've lost your money. You're going to have to pay. And then probably what's going to have to do is you're going to have to pay, and then you're going to have to go change your credit card number because they're still, after the year time is up, they're going to charge you for it. And if you don't pay it then you're going to hurt your credit. And if you don't change your credit card number, you're going to hurt your credit anyway. And probably when that contract is up, you need to go check your credit because they've probably dinged your credit, and you're going to have to go get some court to tell them to get that off your credit. That's how bad it is when you accept something that someone is coming to sell you quickly, and you accept, and you totally throw to the wind all the counsel that can come from anywhere, from the people that you know, from the people that are around you, from the people who've been down that road before. You throw it to the wind, and you accept the counsel of someone that you don't know. You have to be careful. Your feet run in haste, you're going to end up in error. Verse 3. The foolishness of man subverts his ways, and his heart rages against the Lord. God has his divine way that he wants us to operate. You have your way that you want to operate. The two do not match normally until you have an encounter with the Lord. And then hopefully you will accept the Lord's way. The problem is that when men try to do their way instead of God's way, and it doesn't work out for them because they're doing it their way instead of God's way, they get mad at God because God didn't rubber stamp it and make it happen. The fool expects God to bless his endeavors when the fool has not spent time in prayer to find out what God's will is. And the fool has not searched out wise counsel to find out what they should do. That is not good. When you fail to seek God's will, his desire for you, you will not be successful. Verse 4, wealth adds many friends, but a poor man is separated from his friends. When wealth is connected with friendship, when friendships are built on mutual wealth or one of the person's wealth, I call those artificial friendships because you know it and I know it, and we've seen it. All of us are old enough that we can say we have seen it. When wealth stops funding the activities, the friendship is gone. The person who expects you to pay goes someplace else. Verse number 5. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will not escape. Now, I'm sure Solomon's talking about this in the courtroom. If you perjure yourself in the courtroom, your lie will eventually catch up with you. Oh, it may not come very quickly, but it will catch up with you. Just understand this. It would have been better for you to have never given your witness in a courtroom than it would have been for you to get up on the stand and to lie. Guess what? It works that way in family relationships, in our work relationships, and all of our relationships. It is better for you just not to say anything than for you to lie. Bottom line. Verse 6. Many will entreat the favor of a generous man, and every man is friend to him who gives gifts. Well, this is like Proverbs 19:4, 2 verses before. With wealth and generosity lures people into them. Oh, go over here, go over there, go over here, do them. Oh, go to him. He's good. Oh, he gives. Oh, yeah, come to the party. Do this, do that. Wealth brings in artificial friends. And once again, when wealth and generosity are gone, the friends also disappear. Verse 7. All the brothers of a poor man hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursues them with words, but they are gone. Now, not all poor people are beggars. But I will tell you this, when a poor person becomes a beggar, he begs and begs and begs. A phone call came not too long ago from a man who was a very persuasive beggar. In fact, he blamed the church for all of his problems. I did not recognize the name with the first 2 or 3 phone calls when I was trying to gather information. And finally I thought, that's an interesting name. I'm going to call over my friend over here who happens to work at Dobie High School. I called him and I said, do you by any chance know a person who has the same last name that you have? And I told the name, and there came dead silence on the other end of the phone. I said, hello, are you there? He said, yeah, I'm here. I said, do you know the person? He said, yeah, that's my brother. There are 5 brothers. 4 of us have taken care of one brother while he is in and out of the penitentiary. In and out, and he's out. And I said, well, I said, you're not a member of our church, but I know you. I said, should I help him? And he said, please don't. Because he needs to find his way back to the penitentiary, which is where he's headed. And I said, was this because of relationship. He said, we have all helped until we can't help anymore. We have all helped, and all we have helped him do is get in more trouble. The more we help, the more trouble he gets into. He's in trouble right now, and there's a warrant for his arrest. Do not do anything for him. So we did not do anything for him. Within a week, I receive a phone call. His parole has been revoked, and you know where he is. He's back into Pokey, and he's calling, collect, wanting to know if I can get him a lawyer to help get him out. Sometimes in families, there's that brother or sister that you just hate to see coming. If you hate to see that brother or sister coming to you, and most all of us know what we're talking about, how much more will the people out there that they're also begging hate to see them come? In fact, they'll run from him. And what will they do? They'll go after them because it's their fault that that person is in the position they're in. It's their fault that they're always in trouble. It's their fault that they're getting in trouble. It's my fault that he's getting going to prison. Happens all the time. We see it all the time. There are those out there that are just like that. Now, not all people are beggars, but when you deal with a beggar keeps begging and begging and begging. And by the way, all you're doing when you're helping a beggar in most places is helping them continue to do what they should not be doing in order that they can be happy and your pocket can be a little lighter. Verse 8, he who gets wisdom loves his own soul, but he who keeps understanding will find good. Wisdom and understanding always go together. And in fact, when wisdom and understanding go together, they really truly do ease the burdens that come to your soul. And when a soul finds contentment, it is a very true statement. That contentment, you look back and you go, oh, how I love the wisdom and understanding that brought me to this place of peace in my life. The soul who does not seek wisdom and understanding will be constantly burdened, I promise you. Verse 9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will perish. This is a repeat basically of verse 5 up there. What's Solomon saying? Liars will ultimately pay for their sins. Solomon has already said this in other places, other ways, twice here in the chapter. Liars will ultimately pay for their sins. Verse 10, luxury. Luxury is not for a fool, not fitting for a fool, much less for a slave to rule over princesses. Listen, the fineries of royalty are often very awkward for a royal child who is a fool, who is wicked. When a royal fool, a prince, cannot get his way and things are not going well, he'll often seek out counsel from his ministers or from his servants. And if he takes the counsel and it works out well, guess who ends up being really in control of the kingdom? Although it's not the bloodline and it's not the king, not the prince, the slaves, as long as they continue to give good counsel, the employees, the ministers, end up being truly in charge of the kingdom. Now, we know all about this. We have had presidents in our lifetime that we knew that the president was not the power behind the presidency. We knew that there was someone else who was there. And in some cases, not too far back, we really and truly knew that the power of our foreign policy and our machine of war to handle things that were going on was actually truly in the hands of the vice president, who had the most experience and the wisest person in that office, in those offices. That we knew that, without a doubt. It's a team. Now, most of the time in our American ways, the presidency doesn't have much power over anything. But during that administration, that vice president had great power. Was actually basically in charge because he gave wise counsel. Well, same way, it's not right for a prince. Sometimes a foolish prince just can't get things together. And Solomon is correct in that. Verse 11, a man's discretion makes him slow to anger. Discretion makes you slow to anger. And it is his glory to overlook a transgression. Folks, we all know that sin abounds in this world. There's sin that occurs on every time we turn around. Sin is going on with everybody. And a man who has discretion, trying to be righteous with discretion, will not allow that sin that is occurring in front of him to cause him to have anger, to flare up, to be upset. Rather, that man of anger will find within him, that man who's with discretion, trying not to be angry, will find a way to rise above the sin that has been done in front of him. To his glory, when he does that, he will not be drawn into a sin. You see, if I see someone sinning, I do not want to sin in order to put that person in their place. That's what it's talking about. Many times as humans, whenever someone sins, we cause a sin in return. Let me give you a simple one. Let's say your wife says to you, "Honey, why did you do that?" And instead of answering the question, you turn around and say, "Wife, why did you do this?" Do you see what just happened? One was putting a personal blame on someone, the husband, for doing something. And so the husband turns around and puts a personal blame on the wife. Both are sins. Both are sins. And the man of discretion will stop and wait, hold his tongue. The woman of discretion will stop and wait and hold their tongue and find a better way to say it where it's not a sinful thing. Verse 12, the king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. Now listen, not all kings have the discretion that Solomon is talking about here. Not all. But rather, no matter whether that king is a good king or a wicked king, depending on where you are on that king's side will depend whether you think or determine whether you think that king his voice is like a roaring lion or it's like the dew on the grass. Let's say you're a D. Do you know what a D is? You know, we got D's and R's. Now, do you know what D's are? And we know what R's are? Democrats and Republicans. Okay, you got that? D and R's. Oh, my goodness. Listen, our problem today is we don't really have any good D and we don't have any good R's, okay? Let's just be honest. We don't have any good D's and R's. So let's say you're a D, and let's say your president's a D, and you're a D. And as long as you get along with your D president, you think what comes off of his lips is like the dew of the grass. But let's say you are a D and your president is a D, and you don't like what he says, then everything he says is like a roaring lion to you. Well, let's say you're an R, and you like what your R is doing, because you're an R. Well, then everything that comes off of your R president's lips are like the dew on the grass, just sweet and kind and comforting, no matter how bad it is. Well, let's say you disagree with your R. Well, what he says, how dare him say this? Because that's my president, but he's not my president because of what he said. And so we've got D's and R's on both sides. We got people who are D's and R's on both sides who don't like what's going on. And we've got other D's and R's who like what's going on. It's just the way human nature is. And I haven't even mixed the R's over with the D's yet, or the D's over with the R's yet. Do you understand how bad it is? It's bad. When a king's lips, you never know what it is. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter. Solomon is correct. It doesn't matter if it's a good king or a bad king, whether his voice is like a lion's roar to you or like the dew on the grass depends on whether you agree with him or not, whether he is right or wrong. It makes no difference. He could be as wrong as anybody in the world, and you could like what he wants, but you liking what he wants does not make what he likes and what he wants to do right. You may be wrong too. Wrong and wrong may feel like the dew on the grass. Just wait till the Lord gets hold of you. Verse 13. A foolish son is destruction to his father, and the contentions of a wife are as constant dripping. Constant drip. We haven't got to it yet, but There is a proverb coming up that says that a contentious wife, it is better to live in the corner of a house. Never mind, we'll get there when we get there, okay? Let me just tell you what this means. Nothing in the world is more draining on a breadwinner or father than to have a son, a wicked son, that hurts his father's integrity and his father's reputation out in the community. And nothing is more damaging and draining to a husband who's trying to bring and take care of his family to come home to where there is a wife who is causing all sorts of destruction of the peace within the family. Enough said. Verse 14. House and I don't want to get in trouble. That's the reason why I said enough said. You can laugh all you want. I may have been born at night, Tom Joyce, but it wasn't last night. House and wealth are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Prudent. What does the word prudent? Prudent means somebody, I'm going to take care of business today. And oh, by the way, because I have a little left over, I'm going to set that aside to take care of business for tomorrow. And by the way, I need to start taking care of and getting ready for day and after tomorrow and the day after that and in the future. A prudent wife in the house back in Solomon's days was a wife who took care of today and had plans for tomorrow and plans for the future. There was nothing better for a husband than to have a prudent wife. Read the last chapter of Proverbs. When we get there, it's a perfect example of a prudent wife. Well, listen, a house full of wealth and an inheritance is good for a father to put up for his family, to take care of his sons and his daughters and his wife when he's gone, as well as his employees in the land, to take care of all that. That is a good thing. But listen, he can't do that without a prudent wife. A prudent wife. I heard a thing on TV the other day that's really true. I was watching this program called Alone, where many people go out and men and women, they go out and they try to live on the land and everything. One of them said something very profound, and he said this. He says, because they're up in the Alaskan area and it's getting cold and all that, and he said, if you think it's man versus nature, you're always going to lose. Nature will always overpower you. He said, but it's funny how that if you think it's man with nature and you're going along with nature, then you'll always survive. That's interesting that he said that. And then he gave some very good examples of that, of how you do what nature does and how nature works in the wild, and you learn and have knowledge and wisdom of when the fish are coming and all, and when to fish and when to hunt and all, and when to grab this and when to take that and when to use this and when to use that. And I was amazed because he was right. And we can take that same thing and bring it into the home and say, listen, a husband who is trying to keep his home a righteous home, who has a prudent wife, and they're working together, not working apart, not working in totally different directions, they will survive. But if a husband and wife are working in totally different directions, there's always struggles in that home. And that home will eventually really bring great heartache to the family. Verse 15. Laziness cast into a deep sleep. And an idle man will suffer hunger. Now, we've already seen this theme before. Let's hit it really quick. Laziness renders a man useless. So useless that regardless of how hungry he is, he could reach over into the bowl to grab a piece of bread, but he is so lazy that he won't even put it to his mouth to eat. Lazy. I would say that's the epitome of lazy, wouldn't you? Yes, it is. The lazy man will tend to say, will you feed me? Will you cut my meat up for me? Yes, you feed me. Laziness, just plain laziness. Verse 16. He who keeps the commandments keeps his soul, but he who is careless of his ways will die. Just remember this. If you keep the commandments of the Lord will keep you. If you disobey the commandments of the Lord will not keep you. He will not protect you. Don't ever forget that. If you do fail to keep the commandments of the Lord, that will lead to eternal death. If you've accepted the Lord as your Savior and you still fail to keep the commandments of the Lord, then you will not receive the blessings of the Lord because you're out of His will. Verse 17.